Hello everybody and welcome back. Boy, have we got some big news this week. Not only did Sony announce that they're going to release a PlayStation Classic on December 3rd and tell us 5 games they're going to include on it, but the following day, Nintendo's trademark for their Nintendo 64 Classic was approved. So it's official. We are getting a Nintendo 64 Classic. The question isn't if, it's when. So really only Nintendo knows if that's going to be this year or next, but they've had this trademark in the wings and waiting for approval since last year when it was denied a year ago. So I'm really hoping, and it stands to reason, that this could be something that they release this holiday season. It's just a matter of if they're ready to produce enough of them for the holiday season. It's already almost October, and the holiday shopping season starts in November. So even though Sony's going to wait to release the Classic until December, I think that if Nintendo came out and had it ready for Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, it would be an absolute massive seller. The 5 games that I've seen that are going to be on the PlayStation Classic were not... They were not very... They didn't inspire me to go out and spend $100 on a PlayStation Classic. The PlayStation Classic is going to be $100. $99.99. That's $100. And Sony doesn't own a lot of their IPs for those games. So Sony's paying a lot of royalties. Now Sony may have better relationships with a lot of developers than Nintendo does, because Nintendo hasn't always been the friendliest towards its development community. But most of Nintendo's most successful games, most of their best games, are actually first-party IPs. So I think that a Nintendo 64 Classic with almost all first-party IPs would absolutely blow the Sony PlayStation Classic out of the water this holiday season, and I've got the list to prove it. If Nintendo included these games on the 64 Classic, it would cost them almost nothing in royalties or licensing fees, and they would absolutely murder the PlayStation Classic in sales. Especially if they release it at the same time or just before the PlayStation Classic. Because I think the Nintendo 64 Classic, even though it wasn't as commercially successful in the 90s as the original PlayStation was, I think the Nintendo 64 Classic, it holds a lot more of sway when it comes to nostalgia and with people who grew up playing video game systems. And I think even guys like me, who I actually grew up with a PlayStation, I would much rather have the 64 Classic, because I didn't have that system as a kid, and all the games that I'm in love with, the games I remember from Super Nintendo and regular Nintendo, their successors are on the Nintendo 64 Classic, and those are what I always wanted to play growing up. So here's my list. First thing on the list, Super Mario 64. Of course, you cannot have you can't have a Nintendo Classic system without the Mario games. So I'm talking Mario 64, Mario Kart 64, Paper Mario, Super Smash Brothers, Kirby 64, both Zelda games, both Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. I mean, like I said, yeah, it's 2 Zelda games, but they're first-party IPs. It doesn't matter. It's not going to cost them any extra money, and people are going to want both those games on the system. People like me especially, I want both of those games on the system, because I'm a massive Zelda fan. Mario Party games. You've got 3 Mario Party games. Everyone seems to think that Mario Party 2 is the best Mario Party game, but put all 3 of them on there. It's a first-party IP. It's not going to cost them anything. We're already up to 10 games. So, Pilot Wing 64, Bomberman 64, Donkey Kong 64, Excite Bike 64, F-Zero X, Star Fox 64, Yoshi's Story, 1080 Snowboarding, all 5 Pokemon games for the Nintendo 64, and Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3. That's the only IP you're going to pay for. That's the only thing Nintendo doesn't own the rights to. You know, there's a few games that were developed by other studios, but Nintendo owned the IP for those games. They just allowed other studios to develop those sequels. And if I know that a lot of you are probably thinking, what about GoldenEye? What about Perfect Dark? Well, those games are going to cost money to put on the system. And I'd be surprised if Nintendo wants to come in at a higher price point than the PlayStation Classic. I don't think that Nintendo even wants to come in at the same price point as the PlayStation Classic, but everything being even, if they came in at $100 for the Nintendo 64 Classic and they included 2 controllers, had 4 controller ports, and you could buy extra controllers, I'd be happy. I'd be thrilled with that. I don't want the controllers to. I don't need the controllers to even have Rumble. Just have cartridge expansion and produce Rumble packs and sell those separately. That way you can keep the cost of production on the 64 Classic down. So 2 controllers, 64 Classic, all but 1 first-party IPs, and I think they've got a recipe for a massive success. And I think that the 64 Classic could rival or outsell this Super Nintendo Classic. I think that the SNES Classic is beloved by probably the largest number of people out there. I think that it's probably got the biggest, it's probably got the biggest fan base of people to pull from. But I do also think that all those people who wanted an SNES Classic are also going to want to run out and get a 64 Classic, because those people probably have both an NES Classic and the SNES Classic, and they want all 3. I'm in that boat. I have both the NES and SNES Classic. I want all 3. Not only that, though, I want to play all the Nintendo 64 games that I missed out on as a kid. I had friends that had them. I got to play some of them a little bit, and I want to play them now, and I want to be able to play them on an HD TV in the living room with my friends or family when they come over. I think that this is a great opportunity for Nintendo to slap the shit out of Sony this holiday season and just absolutely destroy them in sales of classic systems, because I don't think that the Sony PlayStation is going to be a big seller in general. If Nintendo doesn't release the Nintendo 64, I think that they'll sell some consoles this holiday season, but I think it'll die down fast, and I don't think that they will be anything comparable to either of the Nintendo Classics that have been released so far. But on the other hand, I think that if Nintendo releases the Nintendo 64 Classic this holiday season, I think Sony's sales will be massively hit by that. Because I don't think that a lot of people are going to buy two separate $100 mini consoles. But I think that people, when they have to choose between the two, I think the Nintendo will win hands down. So I think that Nintendo would be doing themselves a huge favor to release the console this holiday season. In a month and a half, almost 2 months, just release it at the end of November for the first big holiday shopping weekend, and I think they absolutely destroy Sony. So, what do you think is going to sell bigger, the Sony PlayStation Classic or the Nintendo 64 Classic? Do you disagree with me or agree with me, and tell me why? Would you buy both consoles, or would you pick one? And if you had to pick one, which one would you pick? What games did I miss that you feel are must-haves? If you haven't already, please hit like and subscribe. It helps the channel out a lot. Leave a comment down below. Tell me what you think. And we'll see you in the next one.